Not many people know the story of this man, Pharaoh Narmer. He was a powerful warrior and military leader, in charge of unifying two rival territories, creating the world's first great political state, Egypt. Consequently, Narmer became the first pharaoh in history. Before entering this realm and exploring the real importance of Pharaoh Narmer in human history, we should first look at the setting in which he emerged and briefly summarize the geopolitics of ancient Egypt. During Narmer's time, around 3100 BC, there were neither pyramids nor sphinxes, but a wild and chaotic landscape of endless wars and conflicts between the settlements along the Nile River. These tribes were called nomes. Their daily life consisted of a continuous struggle for survival. Imagine a barren Wild West, but rather than cowboys, there are small tribes and bands of monarchs who are constantly embroiled in epic battles and bloodshed. 5,000 years ago, in this chaotic atmosphere, Egypt was a lawless land. Not the unified nation that history books like to portray. Far from it. It was split between Upper Egypt, further south along the River Nile, and Lower Egypt in the north, around the Nile Delta. As I mentioned, both territories were not exactly friendly neighbors, more like deadly rivals, warring continuously. Upper Egypt with its dry mountainous lands against Lower Egypt with its fertile plains and Mediterranean access. Two kingdoms with different outfits, traditions, and even crowns. The southern rulers with their tall white crowns known as Hedjet, and the northern rulers with their shallow red crowns called Deshret. There are many historical clues to this. Numerous engravings on ceramics and representations of the leaders of each kingdom always depict two distinct entities with different traditions. But let's get back to it. It was all business as usual, but as in any good story, someone appears to turn the tide. And that person was Narmer. Around 3100 BC, this minor monarch of Upper Egypt came along and mused, "Enough of this division. We are going to form one single Egypt." With a blend of strength, guile, and a knack for strategy, Narmer did exactly that. He unified both lands, fusing the two crowns, and the world suddenly had its first state. When Narmer absorbed the fertile triangular Nile Delta region to the west into his own kingdom, which covered the Nile Valley area to the south, he formed a united Egypt, leading to the world's first great state. The merging of both lands not only heralded the beginning of a political state, but was also the groundbreaking moment for a great cultural state that altered the history of humankind. Following this unification, Egypt evolved a unique visual aesthetic during the Pharaoh era, the influence of which has echoed down the ages. Its iconography, symbols, and writing, embraced by leaders like Narmer and his successors, turned into tools used by all the pharaohs in history, from Khufu to Hatshepsut and Ptolemy XII, to express power, strength, and unity for several millennia. Amazingly, not much is known about Pharaoh Narmer. The historical records are still unclear as to the meaning and interpretation of his name, but it is present throughout Egypt, suggesting that Narmer may have been the first king to rule the entire region. Moreover, his name has also been found outside Egypt, in the region that today falls under Syria and Palestine. This clearly indicates that Narmer did dealings in these regions. Besides these signs elsewhere, there is one major indication of Pharaoh Narmer's greatness: the famous Narmer palette. It resembles a movie carved in stone, with several scenes of war, victories, and mysterious symbols that still puzzle scholars. Narmer apparently wanted to say, "Not only did I unify Egypt, but I also left behind an intriguing piece of art." The other major information source on ancient Egyptian royalty is the Palermo stone, a black granite slab etched with the names of the Egyptian kings up to the 5th dynasty. Along with the entries of the kings, it also includes notes on the annual floods, festivals, wars, and the most important buildings. Unfortunately, only some fragments have survived to this day, stored in Palermo, Cairo, and London. The section of the stone mentioning the very first king of the 1st dynasty has been lost, along with that of his successor. Even in the absence of historical evidence, historians believe that Narmer was the first king, followed by Aha. Although many Egyptologists agree that he founded the first dynasty, the question is still being hotly debated, given that there is no definitive evidence to support this claim. Other issues also stand in the way of his name. The ancient Greeks referred to him as Menes, but there is no consensus that Menes and Narmer were the same person. The scholarly community is sharply divided on this issue. The great Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt around 445 BC, wrote down the names of the Egyptian kings, with Menes being the first. No mention is made of Narmer in his accounts, suggesting that Narmer and Menes were one and the same. But the major drawback of this story rests on the fact that Herodotus visited Egypt centuries after Narmer/Menes had lived, during the late period, and Egyptian pharaohs often took several names throughout their lives, which further complicates the accurate identification of Narmer and his relationship with the name Menes. Meanwhile, William Matthew Flinders Petrie, a renowned Egyptologist, argued that Narmer and Menes were two different names for the same person. Narmer was his birth name, whereas Menes was a title of honor. Manetho, a Greek priest born in Egypt under Greek rule, wrote his work Aegyptica, the history of Egypt, in the 3rd century BC. He categorically affirms that Menes was the first Egyptian pharaoh, and the person largely responsible for unifying Egypt around 3200 BC. Regardless of whether Narmer Menes existed or not, or whether he was the one who unified Egypt, he is an iconic figure in human history. But how was the life of the first pharaoh? What was he like? And what did he do to bring the whole territory together? One thing is certain, he was a skilled military leader. Herodotus and Manetho described Narmer as an experienced military commander loved by his soldiers. This was why he achieved such a feat, since the regions of Lower and Upper Egypt had been in conflict for centuries until Narmer subdued the north, Lower Egypt, and established his authority over the entire Nile Valley. Objects such as the Narmer palette, a mace, which was also a weapon, engravings, seals, and ivory tablets portray him as a ruthless warrior, in action against his enemies. The Narmer palette reveals him grabbing an enemy by the hair and holding a mace to deliver the final blow. On the other side, prisoners are being killed and Narmer is portrayed in a victory march. According to Manetho, he led the army across the border and achieved great glory, perhaps leading his raids as far as Palestine, as suggested by several palaces named after him found in southern Israel. And how did this warrior die? As incredible as it may seem, he did not perish in a great war, but in an odd battle. Pharaoh Narmer died when he encountered a wild giant from African territory, a hippopotamus. The portrayal of Egyptian kings in conflict with these majestic creatures was common and symbolized bravery and power. While the later pharaohs did not take part in these hunts, the early kings most likely needed to prove their prowess through these activities, gaining the support and taxes of their subjects. Manetho's account of Narmer ends with the line, "He was snatched and killed by a hippopotamus," suggesting that such a death was not shameful for a pharaoh. Despite having been such a major figure, not many records exist of Pharaoh Narmer, as the Egyptians never really kept track of their leader's goals. It was only during the Hellenistic period that a Greek priest succeeded in researching and recording Narmer's life in more detail. As a result of these documents, Pharaoh Narmer made his mark on history as the leader who cemented Egypt and influenced the kingship of all the subsequent pharaohs for several generations.